Picking up on the challenge and theme of looking for an honest liberal, we're going to get into the struggle around abortion rights. And to get into this, I want to welcome my co-host, Sunsara Taylor, who's in New York City, but is with us via the miracle of Zoom. How are you, Sunsara? Welcome back.
Andy, it's really good to see you and to be with you, and I'm doing well. Thank you.
Sonny, over the last several weeks, we've been covering on our show, the RNL show, the emergency facing abortion rights, where this fundamental right of women could be overturned by the Supreme Court, likely this spring, or at least it'll be gutted. And you've been part of initiating a movement and issued a statement. The organization is called riseupforabortionrights.org. And this statement that you put out, that a few hundred people have signed, including some people who've been active in women's rights for a long time, was titled, "We refuse to let the Supreme Court deny women's humanity and decimate their rights. We call on everyone to join us in fighting for abortion on demand and without apology." So as we've been discussing, this is a major assault on the rights and the lives of women. Yet, as we've also been getting into in the RNL show, at this very moment, instead of standing up and mobilizing people to fight the attack, the major leaders of the so-called women's movements, the official women's movement, have been capitulating in advance. Instead of fighting against the loss of abortion rights nationally, they're preparing for it. But that is not all. Now, many of the so-called woke folk are not just capitulating to this, they're objectively fighting to lead others to do so, through outrageously erasing women from the struggle for abortion. In fact, these days you can even get canceled for even using the word women. In relation to abortion, Sunsara, what's going on with this?
Well, Andy, first of all, I want to start with what you said, that this attack on abortion, which is an emergency, it's an absolute emergency where the Supreme Court is poised to tear this right away from women and devastate the lives of millions and millions of women and girls and future generations, is an assault on women. It's an assault on half of humanity that is female. Denying women the right to abortion forces women to have children against their will, and it is a form of violence against women. It devastates women's lives. It shatters their dreams. It forecloses their lives. It forces young women to drop out of school or to lose their jobs. It forces women of all ages into poverty or traps them in abusive relationships. And it hangs like a terror and a threat over all women. The idea that you could be forced to have a child against your will. It is true when we say forced motherhood is female enslavement. And this assault needs to be fought and it needs to be defeated, which is why we forged this group, myself and others, riseupforabortionrights.org. And we're calling on people and organizing people to get into the streets to defeat this assault, including on International Women's Day, March 8th, coming up very soon. And we want people to get involved in organizing with us for that. And so, like you said, we put out a statement that begins, "We refuse to let the Supreme Court deny women's humanity and decimate their rights." And the biggest objection we've gotten, actually, in taking this out, I have to tell you, it is not even from the fascists yet. It is from these so-called woke folk who are coming at us and they're saying, well, why are you talking about women? And they're accusing us of being exclusionary of trans people. Now, a lot of viewers might be scratching their heads and saying, well, I don't get this. Of course, the attack on abortion is an attack on women. And people thinking that are correct. But the logic of this woke folk reasoning goes like this. There are some people who can get pregnant and need abortions who do not identify as women. For example, trans men who were female and transitioned to male, and many of them still have female reproductive organs, can get pregnant and need an abortion. And so it is true, trans people also need abortions, and that should be defended, and that's very important. But by this logic, it's extended in a very ludicrous and harmful way to say that by speaking of women being under attack, this is somehow excluding trans people. And this is not just something we've encountered when we put this statement out. This has been building for a while. I want to give an example, and it's one that Bob Avakian gives in the major talk that he did, Something Terrible or Something Truly Emancipating. He talks about how after Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the Supreme Court justice, who was really a defender of abortion rights on the Supreme Court. After she died about a year and a half ago, the ACLU put out a tweet that quoted her, except that it didn't quote her. It really butchered a quote from her. So this is a statement. I want to read it to you that Ruth Bader Ginsburg actually said. She said, "The decision whether or not to bear a child is central to a woman's life, to her well-being and dignity. It is a decision she must make for herself. When government controls that decision for her, she is being treated as less than a fully adult human responsible for her own choices." And now I want to read to you the butchered, gutted, distorted version that the ACLU put out, where they took out the word woman. They said, "The decision whether or not to bear a child is central to a person's life and to their well-being and dignity. When the government controls that decision for people, they are being treated as less than fully adult humans responsible for their own choices." And this completely erases women, and the fact that this assault is about male domination over women and control over women. And this is continued. The ACLU was actually compelled to make an apology for this, but this dynamic of erasing women in the name of inclusion for trans people has continued. And just last month, a major statement was put out by several major organizations in the so-called pro-choice movement that details a whole list of demands, and you go through it. Never once do they mention women. They don't mention girls. They don't talk about patriarchy. Instead, they just speak in completely neutral terms about every individual's right to so-called bodily autonomy. And really, as you said, at this moment when abortion and women are under assault as never before, they are completely hiding this reality and doing harm by obscuring it and actually disarming people who need to be aroused to fight this. So this is the situation that we face.
Well, exactly, because this kind of woke idiocy and erasing women from the battle here, and who are going to be in their millions impacted by this, half of humanity in this country. And because this is doing so much harm, and because the stakes are so high, and there's confusion around it, as well as just outrageous misleadership here. Bob Avakian this week put out a very powerful and a very precise and concentrated article that cuts through all the bullshit on this that we're going to play for you now. And it's going to be read by a member of the RNL crew. It's called "The Fight for Abortion Rights and the Emancipation of Women" by Bob Avakian.
The Fight for Abortion Rights and the Emancipation of Women by Bob Avakian. The essential question at stake, with the escalating attack on the right to abortion, is the fundamental status of the half of humanity that is female, whether they will be enslaved or emancipated. Of course, in the case of the extremely small number of females who have transitioned or are transitioning to males, but who retain female reproductive organs and might get pregnant, they should have the right to abortion and to decent health care overall, without any stigma or discrimination. And in general, attacks directed against trans people must be actively, vigorously opposed. But, in terms of its essential purpose and objective, the attack on the right to abortion is not aimed at trans people. The essence of what is involved is not inclusion, or the lack of inclusion, nor is this about bodily autonomy in some general and abstract sense, a concept which, by the way, would logically include people coming from a very bad place, such as those anti-scientific lunatics and selfish individualists who refuse to get vaccinated against COVID. The attack on the right to abortion is a move to further intensify the already horrific oppression of women, denying them control of their lives and their very bodies, reducing them to breeders of children, cruelly subordinated to men in a patriarchal male supremacist society. Forced motherhood is in fact female enslavement. Anything which waters down or distracts from this essential truth is objectively aiding this fundamental attack on the half of humanity that is female, is undermining the fight for their emancipation and the emancipation of humanity as a whole from any form of oppression and exploitation.
So that was Bob Avakian's new piece, The Fight for Abortion Rights and the Emancipation of Women, which you can find on revcom.us. Sunsara, that gets to the heart of the matter, and I just want to let that sit with people for a second and encourage people who are watching this to read it and to read it again and then to spread it and to get into conversations about this and to write us about it. But I want to end this segment by briefly asking you, you mentioned earlier International Women's Day. That's March 8th. Could you say some more about that and let our audience know what the vision for this is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the big idea is, as opposed to capitulating and letting this right of women be taken away, the right to abortion to control their own bodies and lives, we have to get out there and wake people up in this society and mobilize them and organize them into the streets to stand up and fight. And we need a fight on a scale that will actually rock this society, that will push back what this Supreme Court thinks it can get away with right now. We've seen struggle on a level like this in Poland, in Argentina, in Mexico, and other parts of the world, where the unleashed fury of women and others has filled the streets relentlessly and inspired the world. And we need that here. I'm not talking about protests for one day. I'm talking about something on the order of what we saw in the beautiful rising 2 years ago against the police murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, saying we refuse to let women be enslaved by forced motherhood. And so we are riseupforabortionrights.org is rallying people and organizing people to become part of this movement nationwide. And the next major throwdown moment to step this struggle up, to bring people into the streets, thousands of people, and to shake and wake up millions more to then go forward further, is International Women's Day. It's March 8th. It's a day, a revolutionary holiday around the world and for a long time in the revolutionary movements in different parts of the world. And here, this year, the RevComs need to be out there with the full mission of break the chains, unleash the fury of women as a mighty force for revolution, but also raising this demand, abortion on demand and without apology, and uniting very broadly and fighting to bring other people into this fight, into the streets, March 8th. Exact details will be announced soon, but we're calling on people to write into info@riseupforabortionrights.org to get involved in organizing wherever you are, spreading the word, donating, and being part of making March 8th a very powerful day in this fight to go forward.
Okay, well, we on the RNL show will be, of course, going deeply into the nature, the causes of the oppression of women and its solution in an actual revolution and moving forward through a socialist society. But I do want to say and underscore the point you just made, that the more, that if, but not really more, if people don't fight this in massive numbers, fight for the right to abortion, yes, up against odds, it's going to be a horrific future. It's going to contribute to just a terrible situation for humanity and for women in particular. On the other hand, if people do fight in their millions in exactly the way you've been talking about, like in Poland and with the Black Lives Matter movement after the murder of George Floyd, that's going to open up big questions that people have had about the whole system. It'll open up the possibility for people to be able to imagine a whole other world. So, Sunsara, I just want to say we miss you here at the RNL show, and even if we can have you on through the miracle of Zoom, we'll be in touch more. You'll be back on the show, and let's go.
All right, Andy, it's good to see you. And my greetings to everybody out there tuning in. Spread the show.
Okay, great. Thanks.